I was hunched over in a moldy motel bathroom, washing my only dress shirt in the sink when my phone rang with the call that would change everything. The cheap phone vibrated against the cracked porcelain, nearly falling into the soapy water where my last shred of dignity was soaking. My name's Ethan Parker, and 6 months ago, I had everything a man could want. A loving wife, two amazing kids, and a secure position as operations manager at Westlake Manufacturing. Now I was living on crackers and peanut butter, sleeping in a 39 per night motel that smelled like decades of other people's desperation. The caller ID showed unknown, but something told me to answer. Perhaps when you've hit rock bottom, any change feels like it might be upward. Hello. My voice sounded strange even to my own ears, hoarse from not having anyone to talk to for days. Ethan Parker? The voice was unfamiliar, older, gruff, like whiskey over gravel. Who's asking? I squeezed water from my shirt, watching it drain away like my former life. My name's Calvin Roberts. I was your Uncle William's attorney. We need to talk. Uncle William, the family outcast, the conspiracy theorist who lived in a cabin in Colorado and sent me bizarre Christmas cards about government surveillance until he died 3 months ago. The uncle I hadn't seen in person since I was 12, when he showed up at our family reunion ranting about corporate corruption and my father's so-called accident. Everyone had rolled their eyes and kept their children away from him. My mother had called him damaged goods after his time in Desert Storm. I don't mean to be rude, but I'm dealing with some personal issues right now. An understatement so profound it almost made me laugh. Personal issues, like losing your entire life while everyone watched and no one helped. I know exactly what you're dealing with, Calvin said, his voice dropping lower. I know your wife Amanda left you for Jackson Reynolds. I know Reynolds fired you from Westlake. I know he's living in your house with your children. He paused, letting each statement land like a hammer blow. And I know why. I nearly dropped the phone in the sink. The hairs on my arms stood up, a primal reaction to hearing someone articulate the nightmare I'd been living. How could you possibly? William knew this would happen. He's been watching the Reynolds family for decades, ever since your father's death. Another pause. There's a package waiting for you at Western Union. Confirmation number 40729. Pick it up, follow the instructions. Don't tell anyone. Not your friends, not your brother, not your drinking buddy, nobody. Why would I? Because they're still watching you, Ethan. The same people who destroyed your life are making sure you stay destroyed. William tried to warn your father 20 years ago, but no one listened. They called him crazy. I heard papers shuffling. Your father wasn't killed in a random industrial accident, Ethan. And your wife didn't just happen to fall for your boss. None of this is coincidence. The line went dead. I stood in that bathroom, my dress shirt dripping on my shoes, my mind reeling. It had to be a sick joke, some twisted prank. My father's death had been thoroughly investigated, a tragic accident at Westlake when a hydraulic press malfunctioned. I was only 7 when it happened, but my mother had explained everything. The company had paid a settlement. My father was honored with a plaque in the employee break room. But what did I have to lose? My dignity was currently dripping onto the bathroom floor, and my trust in humanity had evaporated the moment I saw Jackson Reynolds' Tesla in my driveway 3 months ago. The Western Union was next to a pawn shop where I'd sold my wedding ring last month. The clerk looked at my rumpled appearance with barely concealed disdain as I gave him the confirmation number. Inside the package was $10,000 in cash, a burner phone, and a handwritten note. This is just enough to get you to Colorado. The real money is waiting there. If you want to know why your life was destroyed, drive to these coordinates. Tell no one. Trust no one. The cabin has everything you need to understand why this happened and how to make it right. This isn't about revenge, Ethan. It's about justice for your father, for you, for your children. William taped to the back was a key that looked like it belonged to a padlock, not a door. I stared at the cash, more money than I'd seen in months, and felt something stir inside me. Something beyond the numbness and depression that had become my constant companions. Curiosity, maybe even hope. 6 months earlier, I was the operations manager at Westlake Manufacturing, overseeing 200 employees who produced precision metal components for the aerospace industry. My office had a window overlooking the production floor. My business cards had a foil logo. At company parties, people listened when I spoke. The company had been my life for 15 years, starting in the mailroom during college and working my way up through determination and attention to detail. I had a 3-bedroom colonial on Oak Drive with a finished basement where I built model airplanes with my son Liam. Every Saturday morning, we'd work on our latest project, a B-17 Flying Fortress, a Spitfire, a P-51 Mustang, while talking about his week at school. My daughter Emma had her own bathroom decorated with purple butterflies she'd painted herself during a father-daughter weekend when Amanda visited her sister. Emma was artistic, sensitive, always leaving drawings on my nightstand to give you good dreams, Daddy. My wife Amanda taught 3rd grade at the elementary school and made lasagna on Sundays. She had been my high school sweetheart, the homecoming queen who surprised everyone by choosing the quiet, studious boy instead of the football captain. We'd been married for 15 years, building what I thought was a perfect life. Her blonde hair had darkened slightly over the years and laugh lines had appeared around her eyes, but to me, she was as beautiful as the day we met, or so I'd thought. Jackson Reynolds took over as CEO of Westlake 3 years ago when his father retired. Old Man Reynolds built the company from nothing, turning a small machine shop into one of the largest manufacturers in the state. Alexander Reynolds was a legend, tough but fair, according to company lore. Jackson had his father's ambition but none of his integrity. While Alexander had walked the factory floor daily, learning every employee's name, Jackson managed through fear and intimidation, rarely leaving his corner office except to take important clients to expensive lunches. I remember the first time I saw him looking at Amanda. It was at the company Christmas party. She wore a red dress that hugged her curves, her blonde hair falling in waves over her shoulders. She was laughing at something our friend Sarah said, her head tilted back, exposing the elegant line of her throat. Jackson watched her from across the room like she was already his. When his eyes briefly met mine, there was no shame, no acknowledgement that he was coveting another man's wife, only assessment, like a man calculating the value of property he intended to acquire. I should have recognized the danger then, but I trusted her, trusted our marriage, trusted 15 years of building a life together. The thought that Amanda, who had held my hand through my mother's long illness, who had stayed up all night when Liam had pneumonia, who knew every fear and dream I'd ever had, could betray me was inconceivable. The first sign should have been the late nights at school, preparing for the big state assessment, she said. The new clothes she couldn't quite explain when our budget was always carefully planned. The way she started criticizing everything about me, my ambition, my salary, even the way I chewed my food. Jackson says you're holding yourself back, she mentioned casually over dinner one night, pushing her salad around her plate. He thinks you have potential, but you're too comfortable, too afraid to take risks. I thought she was trying to motivate me. I worked harder, stayed later, brought home more projects, trying to impress a man who was already sleeping with my wife. The bitter irony makes me laugh now, a hollow, painful sound that startles even me when it escapes. The day I found out, I came home early with a migraine. My head felt like it was splitting open, lights causing shooting pain behind my eyes. I'd been having more headaches recently, probably from the stress of trying to meet Jackson's increasingly impossible expectations. All I wanted was darkness, silence, and sleep. I saw Jackson's Tesla in my driveway. The silver sedan gleamed in the afternoon sun, an alien spacecraft that had landed in suburbia. My first thought was not suspicion, but concern. Why would the CEO come to my home? Had something catastrophic happened at the plant? Was I being fired? The thought made my already painful head throb more intensely. Walking into my own house felt like stepping into an alternate reality. The television was on in the living room, playing a documentary about deep-sea creatures, strange luminescent fish floating across the screen. But no one was watching. 2 wine glasses on the coffee table, a man's suit jacket, too expensive for my salary, draped over the back of my recliner. I called out Amanda's name, my mouth suddenly dry. No answer, but I heard movement upstairs. Music was playing from our bedroom. Leonard Cohen, Amanda's favorite for what she called grown-up time. The realization dawned slowly, my brain refusing to process what was becoming obvious. The master bedroom door was closed. I heard Amanda's laugh, a sound I thought I knew, but now realized was being performed for a different audience. It was her flirtatious laugh, the one I hadn't heard directed at me in months, years maybe. I stood outside that door for what felt like eternity, my hand hovering over the knob, knowing that opening it would change everything. There would be no going back to not knowing, to blissful ignorance. The pain in my head receded, replaced by a strange clarity. I turned the knob. I opened the door. Amanda and Jackson stared at me from our bed. The bed where our children had crawled in on Sunday mornings for family cuddles, where I'd held Amanda when her mother died, where we'd made love thousands of times. Jackson was propped against the headboard, bare-chested, his expensive watch glinting in the afternoon light filtering through the curtains Amanda had sewn herself. My wife was beside him, the sheet pulled up over her chest, her hair disheveled, lipstick smudged. "Ethan," Amanda said, her voice calm, almost annoyed at the interruption. "You're supposed to be at work." Not surprise, not shame, annoyance. Jackson didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. He just gave me that CEO smile, the one that said he was used to taking what he wanted and facing no consequences. "We need to talk, Ethan," he said, as if we were in a board meeting discussing quarterly projections. "Why don't you give us a minute to get dressed, and we can discuss this like adults?" Like adults, as if sleeping with your employee's wife was the adult thing to do, as if destroying a family was just another business transaction to be negotiated. I didn't scream, didn't throw punches, just turned around, walked downstairs, and sat at the kitchen table, staring at my daughter's science project, a volcano that had won first place at school. Emma had been so proud, bouncing around the kitchen when she told me about the blue ribbon. I had helped her with the wiring for the LED lights that made the lava glow red. Now it sat on our kitchen counter, a monument to a family life that had apparently been an illusion. When they came downstairs, Amanda was wearing a silk robe I'd never seen before, dark blue with an embroidered dragon. Jackson had his sleeves rolled up, his tie loosened, looking inconvenienced rather than caught. "This isn't how we wanted you to find out," Amanda said, crossing her arms over the robe I hadn't bought her. "We?" The word felt like acid in my mouth. "Ethan, Amanda, and I have developed feelings for each other," Jackson said, his hand on my wife's lower back. "These things happen. People grow apart. I think we can handle this transition professionally." Professionally, as if I'd just been passed over for a promotion instead of finding him in bed with my wife. As if the complete implosion of my life could be managed with the right corporate strategy. "How long?" I asked Amanda, searching her face for any trace of the woman I thought I'd married. She sighed, annoyed at having to provide details. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." 8 months, she said finally, but emotionally, longer. 8 months, while I was coaching Liam's soccer team, while we were planning our summer vacation to Lake Michigan, while we were celebrating our 15th anniversary at the restaurant where we had our first date, while I was telling my brother Mike that I'd hit the lottery with Amanda, that I was the luckiest man alive. "What about the kids?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, as if it were coming from someone else. "They'll adjust," Amanda said, twisting a strand of hair around her finger, a nervous habit I'd always found endearing. Now it just seemed calculating. "Children are resilient, and Jackson can provide opportunities for them that you never could. Private schools, summer programs, college funds." I looked at her, really looked at her, and wondered if I'd ever known her at all. This woman who could reduce 15 years of marriage to a business transaction, who could talk about our children like they were assets to be transferred to a more profitable portfolio. "You should go stay with your brother for a few days," she continued, her voice softening in what I now recognized as practiced manipulation. "Give us some space to figure out the logistics. I'll explain things to Liam and Emma." "You want me to leave my own house?" The absurdity of it made me laugh, a sharp, ugly sound. Jackson stepped forward, squaring his shoulders like he was preparing for a difficult negotiation. "Ethan, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. I've already spoken with HR. Your position is being restructured, effective immediately. The severance package is generous. It includes 6 weeks of pay and continuation of benefits through the end of the month. I was being fired, in my own kitchen, while my boss's hand rested on my wife's hip. "You can't do that," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they weren't true. Jackson Reynolds could do whatever he wanted. His father had built Westlake Manufacturing, and Jackson had inherited not just the company, but all the power that came with it. "It's already done," he said, not unkindly. "Your access has been revoked. Your personal items are being packed as we speak. This doesn't have to be ugly, Ethan. For the kids' sake." The kids, my children, who would now be living with this man who had dismantled their father's life with surgical precision. I packed a bag in a daze, taking only clothes and my father's old watch. Amanda stood in the doorway, arms crossed, checking her phone occasionally as if this whole situation was keeping her from more important matters. "The kids will be home from school soon," she said. "It's better if you're not here. I'll tell them you had to go on a business trip." "A business trip to where? I just got fired." She shrugged. "We'll figure something out. Jackson knows people. He can help you land on your feet somewhere else. Somewhere, not here." The casual cruelty of it stunned me into silence. I looked around our bedroom, the photos on the dresser, the mismatched lamps we'd bought at different garage sales, the quilt Amanda's grandmother had made for our wedding, and realized I was being erased from my own life. I drove to my brother Mike's apartment, explained the situation between gulps of the whiskey he poured me. He offered his couch, said I could stay as long as I needed, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. Mike worked at the bank that held Westlake's accounts. His promotion to branch manager was pending. Having his disgraced brother sleeping on his couch could complicate things. "This is insane," he said, refilling my glass. "Amanda wouldn't do this. There must be some explanation." But there wasn't. 3 days later, Amanda's lawyer served me with divorce papers. She wanted the house, primary custody of the children, alimony and child support, all from a man who no longer had an income. The papers referred to irreconcilable differences, as if what had happened was just a mutual growing apart rather than a calculated destruction. The restraining order came a week after that. According to Amanda's sworn statement, I had a history of unpredictable behavior and concerning outbursts. The evidence? I'd punched a wall once when we were in college, after my basketball team lost the championship. And apparently I'd been displaying erratic behavior at work, according to statements from colleagues I'd thought were friends. The judge, who I later learned played golf with Jackson every Sunday, granted the temporary order. I wasn't allowed within 500 feet of my own home. Couldn't see my children except during supervised visits at the Family Services Center. Couldn't contact Amanda except through her attorney. My brother's girlfriend started leaving hints about personal space and temporary arrangements. My savings dwindled. I moved to the Red Roof Inn, then to the even cheaper Starlight Motel when the money got tighter. My former co-workers stopped returning my calls. The few interviews I managed to land mysteriously fell through after reference checks. It was as if I'd been erased from my own life, replaced by a wealthier, more powerful model who now slept in my bed, lived in my house, and was playing father to my children. The only bright spot was seeing Liam and Emma during my supervised visits, though even those moments were tainted. They arrived with new clothes, new toys, stories about trips to places I could never afford to take them. Emma, at 9, was adaptable but confused. Liam, 12 and angry, asked questions I couldn't answer. "Why don't you fight harder to come home?" he demanded during one visit, his voice cracking with emotion. "Mom says you're choosing to stay away." What could I say? That a piece of paper kept me away? That their mother had systematically dismantled our family? That the man now living in our house had orchestrated my professional and personal destruction? That the entire legal system seemed aligned against me? Instead, I hugged him, promised things would get better, and died a little inside knowing I had no power to make that promise come true. During one particularly painful visit, Emma handed me a drawing she'd made. It showed 4 stick figures, a tall man in a suit labeled Jackson, a woman with yellow hair labeled Mom, and 2 smaller figures labeled Liam and Emma. Off to the side, separated by what appeared to be a wall, was another figure labeled Dad. Above it, in her careful 3rd-grade handwriting, "My family now." I folded the drawing carefully and put it in my pocket. That night, alone in my motel room, I stared at it until my vision blurred. Then I went to the bathroom and vomited until there was nothing left inside me. The next morning, I seriously considered ending it all. What was left to live for? My career was destroyed, my reputation ruined, my family taken. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, my father's old service revolver, the one possession of his I'd kept, heavy in my hands. One bullet, one moment of courage, one end to the pain. The phone rang. It was Calvin Roberts calling from the burner phone he'd included in the package. "Did you get the money?" "Yes," I said, setting the gun aside. "Are you coming to Colorado?" "I haven't decided." "Decide quickly," he said. "They're moving faster than we anticipated." "Who's moving? What are you talking about?" "Jackson Reynolds just filed to adopt your children. Amanda's supporting it. They're trying to terminate your parental rights entirely." The words hit me like physical blows. Terminate my parental rights. Erase me completely. Take away even the supervised visits that kept me going. "How do you know this?" "William had sources, good ones. The petition was filed yesterday." He paused. "This was always the end game, Ethan. It's not about your wife or your job. It's about your children, about control." "Control of what?" "Come to Colorado, find out." I looked at the gun, then at Emma's drawing. The choice crystallized. I could die here, alone and defeated, or I could fight, not just for myself, but for my children, for the truth. "I'll leave tonight," I said. I drove through the night from Ohio to Colorado, stopping only for gas and coffee. The $10,000 felt like a fortune after months of counting pennies. I bought new clothes, got a haircut, ate real food in restaurants instead of vending machine sandwiches. With each mile, I felt more human, more capable, more determined to uncover whatever mystery Uncle William had left for me. The coordinates led me deep into the mountains, to a property so remote my phone lost signal 20 miles back. The dirt road ended at a gate with a no trespassing sign. The key from William's envelope fit perfectly. Beyond the gate, the road wound another mile through dense forest before opening to a clearing. There stood not the rustic cabin I'd expected, but a modern mountain home with walls of glass reflecting the surrounding pines. Solar panels lined the southern exposure, a satellite dish perched on the roof. This was not the home of a recluse. This was the fortress of someone who wanted to stay connected while remaining hidden. Inside, it was a contradiction. Beautiful contemporary furniture alongside walls covered in papers, photographs, and maps connected by red string, like something from a detective show. One entire room was filled with filing cabinets, computer equipment, and locked safes. On the kitchen counter was an envelope with my name on it. "Ethan, if you're reading this, I'm dead, and everything I feared has come to pass. They've taken everything from you, just as they took everything from your father. The difference is you're still alive to fight back. Your father wasn't killed in an accident. He was murdered because he discovered that Alexander Reynolds was stealing from their partnership. The hydraulic press was sabotaged. I tried to get the police to investigate, but Reynolds owned everyone in that town. I've spent 20 years building this case. The evidence is all here. The shell companies Reynolds used to hide assets, the bribes to local officials, the real ownership documents for Westlake Manufacturing. Half that company belongs to you, Ethan. Always has. Your wife didn't fall in love with Jackson Reynolds by accident. She was placed in your life when you were both in college. Reynolds has been planning this for years. Marry you to someone he controls, wait for you to have children, then destroy you completely so you'd never be in a position to claim what's rightfully yours. The second safe contains $2 million in cash. The third contains the original partnership agreement between your father and Alexander Reynolds, plus documentation of all the crimes committed by both Reynolds men to keep control of the company. What you do with this information is up to you. Take the money and disappear, or take everything back. Your Uncle William, I sat on the kitchen floor, reading and rereading the letter, feeling like I was losing my mind. It sounded insane. A decades-long conspiracy? Amanda as some kind of plant? My father's accident actually murder? But then I started opening the safes, using the combinations provided in separate envelopes. The money was real, stacks of hundreds neatly banded. The documents were real too. Photocopies of the original partnership agreement showing my father and Alexander Reynolds as equal owners of what was then called R&P Manufacturing, insurance policies, police reports, maintenance records for the hydraulic press that killed my father, showing it had been inspected and cleared the day before the accident. Most damning were the financial records showing how the Reynolds family had diverted profits through shell companies, fraudulently diluting my father's ownership stake after his death. My mother, devastated by grief and caring for a 7-year-old son alone, had signed away rights she didn't understand for what the papers called financial considerations. A small house in a good school district, a college fund for me, health insurance, all while the Reynolds family stole millions that should have been ours. Then came the files about Amanda, photos of her meeting with Jackson while we were still in college, bank statements showing regular deposits into an account I never knew existed, a transcript of a recorded conversation. Amanda, how much longer do I need to keep this up? 15 years is a long time to pretend. Jackson, just until we have full custody. Once the judge grants that, his parental rights can be terminated. You'll be free, rich, and finally done with this charade. Amanda, and if he somehow discovers the truth? Jackson, he won't. But if he did, who would believe him? A jobless, unstable man making wild accusations about one of the most respected businessmen in the state? He'd sound crazy, just like his uncle. The most bizarre discovery was a dossier about me from my college days. Psychological assessments, dating history, family background, notes about my suitability and predictability. They had studied me like a lab rat before sending Amanda to become my girlfriend. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had been selected for me by the man who murdered my father. I spent 3 days in that house, barely sleeping, going through every document, listening to every recording. My entire adult life had been a lie. My marriage, my career, even my father's death, all manipulated by the Reynolds family. The rage came in waves, overwhelming in its intensity. I broke things, a lamp, a coffee mug, my own knuckles against a wall. Then came the despair, the sense of violation so profound I could barely breathe. How do you process learning that your entire existence has been controlled by unseen hands? That your most intimate relationship was a fiction? That your children, the only true thing in this web of lies, were conceived as part of a grand scheme? On the third night I sat, on the deck overlooking the forest, a glass of Williams' expensive scotch in my hand, and considered my options. Option 1, take the money and disappear. $2 million would set me up comfortably anywhere in the world. I could start over, build a new life far from the Reynolds' reach. Option 2, go public with the evidence. But who would believe me? The recordings might be inadmissible in court. The financial documents were complex and would require forensic accountants to decipher. I'd be painted as a bitter ex-husband spinning conspiracy theories. Option 3, confront Amanda and Jackson directly. Demand the truth, but they'd already shown they were willing to destroy me to keep their secrets. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the clearing, a fourth option crystallized in my mind. I wouldn't run, and I wouldn't make accusations no one would believe. I would build a case so airtight, so thoroughly documented, that not even the Reynolds' money and influence could suppress it. When I finally emerged from Williams' house, I had a plan. First, I drove to Denver and met with Patricia Miles, a former federal prosecutor turned private attorney who specialized in corporate fraud. I paid her retainer with cash from Williams' safe. This is either the most elaborate conspiracy I've ever seen, she said after reviewing the documents, or you're delusional. Let me verify some of these records independently. 2 days later, she called me back to her office. Everything checks out, she said, her expression grave. The partnership agreement is legitimate. The financial fraud is provable. The evidence of tampering with the hydraulic press is circumstantial but compelling. She hesitated. The recordings of your wife, however, are legally problematic. Colorado is a two-party consent state for recordings. What does that mean for the case? It means we can pursue the financial fraud and potentially reopen the investigation into your father's death. But the evidence about your wife's involvement may never see a courtroom. She leaned forward. But that doesn't mean we can't use it strategically in settlement negotiations. Next, I contacted Special Agent Trevor Barnes at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, a name I'd found in Williams' notes. He'd apparently been building a case against Reynolds Enterprises for years, but lacked the smoking gun evidence that William had accumulated. "Your uncle contacted me 6 months before he died," Barnes told me over coffee at a nondescript diner outside Denver. "Said he had everything I needed but wanted to wait for the right moment. I thought he was just another conspiracy theorist." He shook his head. "I should have taken him more seriously." The federal investigation moved slowly, methodically. Barnes and his team verified each document, interviewed witnesses William had identified, followed money trails through shell companies in offshore accounts. Meanwhile, I focused on staying alive. William's paranoia no longer seemed irrational. If the Reynolds family had orchestrated my father's accident and my personal destruction, they might not stop there. I changed motels every few days, used cash only, stayed away from cameras and social media. During this time, my supervised visits with Liam and Emma were my only connection to my former life. Each meeting was more painful than the last. The children were being coached, that much was clear. Liam's anger toward me grew more intense. Emma became more withdrawn, no longer running to hug me when she arrived. "Mom says you're trying to hurt Jackson," Liam said during one visit. "She says you're making up lies because you're jealous." "That's not true," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I would never lie to you." "Then why does Mom cry every time your name comes up? Why does she have to take those pills to sleep?" The manipulation was expert, using my children's love and concern against me. I wanted to tell them everything, about their grandfather's murder, about their mother's deception, about the inheritance that was rightfully theirs. But they were too young to understand, and burdening them with such knowledge would only cause more harm. Instead, I focused on being present during our limited time together. I helped Liam with his math homework, played board games with Emma, tried to create moments of normalcy in our surreal situation. During one visit, Emma whispered to me while Liam was in the bathroom, "Jackson makes Mom cry too, when he thinks we're asleep." Her eyes were wide, serious. "He calls her names, bad ones." A chill ran through me. Was Amanda herself a victim in this scenario? A pawn who had played her part too well and was now trapped in a relationship with a controlling, abusive man? The possibility added another layer of complexity to an already Byzantine situation. If Amanda was being coerced or threatened, could she become an ally rather than an adversary? Within weeks, the machinery of justice began moving. Federal agents executed search warrants at Westlake Manufacturing and the Reynolds family offices. Jackson was brought in for questioning. The company's accounts were frozen. I stayed in Williams' house, following the advice of my new legal team to remain out of sight. I grew a beard, lost weight, became someone even my own children might not recognize. The news broke nationally. Manufacturing dynasty faces federal fraud charges. CEO arrested in decades-long financial scheme. Justice Department reopens 1995 industrial death investigation. Amanda called me from Ohio, the first direct contact we'd had in months. "What have you done?" she hissed. "Found the truth," I replied. "William had everything, Amanda. The recordings, the bank statements, photos of you with Jackson going back to college." Silence on the line then. "You don't understand what they'll do to me." Who will do?" "His father," she whispered. "Alexander, he's the one who arranged everything. He found me in my freshman year, offered to pay off my student loans, set me up for life if I just got close to you." "Why me?" "Because of who your father was, what he knew, what he left behind." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know they were going to kill him, Ethan, I swear. I thought it was just about the company. You let me believe you loved me for 15 years. You had children with me." "I didn't have a choice," she cried. "By the time I wanted out, we had Liam, and Alexander said he'd ruin me, take everything, make sure I never saw my son again. Then when Emma came, it got more complicated. The children were the whole point, Ethan. They needed your heirs, your bloodline, to fully secure the company. So instead, you helped them do that to me." "I'm sorry," she said, and for the first time since this nightmare began, she sounded sincere. "I never meant for it to go this far. I never thought they'd take everything from you. What did you think would happen? I thought, I thought we'd just divorce, that you'd get shared custody, that Jackson would take over the company, and that would be enough." She paused. "But then Alexander got sick last year. Terminal cancer. He became obsessed with tying up loose ends before he died. That's when they decided to destroy you completely. And you went along with it. You don't say no to Alexander Reynolds, not if you want to keep breathing." Her voice lowered. "He killed your father, Ethan. He had his mistress's husband eliminated when the man became inconvenient. He ruined a judge who ruled against him in a civil case. The man's daughter overdosed. His wife was found with child pornography on her computer. Both lies, but effective ones. Why are you telling me this now? Because I'm scared. Because Jackson isn't his father. He's worse, more volatile, less controlled. He hit me last week when the FBI took the company's servers. He threatened the children." My blood ran cold. "He threatened Liam and Emma?" "Not directly, but he said if I didn't cooperate, accidents happen to children all the time. I've moved the kids to my sister's in Cincinnati, told Jackson it was to protect them from press attention. What do you want from me, Amanda? Protection, immunity, a chance to make this right. You want to testify?" "I want to live," she said simply, "and I want my children to live, whatever that takes." The deposition took place in Patricia Miles's office. For 8 hours, Amanda detailed the entire scheme, how Alexander Reynolds had recruited her, how they planned my professional destruction, how Jackson had initiated their affair on his father's instruction, how they manipulated evidence to obtain the restraining order. She revealed that Alexander Reynolds had been systematically eliminating or neutralizing anyone who might threaten his control of Westlake Manufacturing for decades. My father was just one of many victims. The company's success was built on fraud, intimidation, and occasionally murder. When she finished, she looked hollowed out, a shell of the confident woman who had dismissed me from our kitchen months earlier. "What happens to the children?" she asked quietly. "They come home," I said. "To their father." "And to me?" Hope flickered across her face. "That depends on the prosecutors, and on whether I ever believe a word you say again." Her immunity deal required full cooperation. She wore a wire to meetings with Jackson, recorded phone calls with Alexander Reynolds from his hospital bed, provided access to financial records, emails, offshore accounts. The evidence was damning. Alexander Reynolds died before he could be arrested, but Jackson and several company executives were charged with multiple felonies: fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy. The investigation into my father's death was reopened, with the medical examiner now concluding it was homicide by industrial sabotage. The most surreal moment came when I returned to my hometown for the first time in months. The same people who had shunned me now nodded respectfully. Former colleagues who'd ignored my calls suddenly remembered our friendship. The bank that had denied me a loan now offered preferential rates. I declined them all. My focus was singular: regaining custody of my children and rebuilding their sense of security. The legal battles took nearly a year. The criminal cases against Jackson Reynolds and his associates resulted in guilty pleas to avoid longer sentences. 15 years for Jackson, with no possibility of parole for at least 10. The civil case restored my 50% ownership of Westlake Manufacturing, now worth approximately $55 million. Amanda avoided prison by turning state's evidence, but lost custody of our children. The psychological evaluations showed the damage her lies had done, particularly to Liam, who had believed I abandoned them. "I never meant to hurt them," she told me during a supervised exchange of the children's belongings. "I thought I was giving them a better life. By taking away their father?" She had no answer for that. Rebuilding trust with my children was the hardest part. Emma, younger and more resilient, adjusted more quickly. She still had nightmares, still asked difficult questions about why people lied and whether anyone could be trusted, but her natural optimism helped her heal. Liam's anger took longer to fade. He'd been old enough to understand betrayal, but too young to process its complexity. He'd believed the worst about me because the alternative, that his mother had lied to him, was too painful to accept. "Why didn't you tell us what was happening?" he asked one night as I tucked him into bed in our new home, a modest four-bedroom house far from our old neighborhood. Because I didn't know the truth myself, I answered honestly. And then when I found out, I needed to make sure I could protect you both. Mom said you were weak, he said, his eyes searching my face. But you fought back. You won. I sat on the edge of his bed. This wasn't about winning or losing, Liam. It was about truth, about making things right. Sometimes the people we trust most let us down. That doesn't mean we stop trusting. It means we learn to be careful about who deserves that trust. Do you hate Mom? He asked, the question that had clearly been weighing on him. No, I said after a moment. I'm angry at what she did and sad about what we lost. But hate takes too much energy. And whatever else she may have done, she gave me you and your sister. I can never hate someone who brought you into my life. He seemed satisfied with that answer, at least for now. There would be more difficult conversations ahead as both children grew and understood more about what had happened. But for that moment, honesty was enough. I sold my share of Westlake back to the company once new leadership was installed. Used the money to start Parker Precision, a smaller operation focused on quality over quantity. Hired some of my former colleagues who'd been caught in the fallout of the Reynolds collapse. Williams Mountain property became our summer retreat, though I took down the walls of evidence, replacing them with family photos, new memories to overwrite the painful ones. Amanda moved to California after the divorce was finalized. She sends birthday cards to the kids, occasional emails checking in, but keeps her distance. Whether from shame or self-preservation, I'm not sure. The children speak to her weekly by phone. The conversations are awkward, stilted, but necessary for their emotional well-being. I kept William's letter in my desk drawer, reading it occasionally to remind myself how quickly life can change, both for worse and for better. My crazy, paranoid uncle had saved me from a fate worse than death, living forever as a hollowed-out shell of a man, believing he'd lost everything through his own failures. Sometimes I stand in the doorway of my children's rooms at night, watching them sleep, and think about how close I came to losing them forever. How a conspiracy set in motion, before I was even out of college, nearly destroyed 3 generations of my family. But it didn't, because William refused to be silenced. Because the truth, no matter how deeply buried, eventually finds its way to the surface. Last week I took Liam and Emma to the cemetery where my father is buried. We cleaned his headstone, left fresh flowers, and I told them the real story of their grandfather. Not the sanitized version of a workplace accident, but the truth of a man who refused to be cheated, who stood his ground against corruption, who unwittingly set in motion events that would echo through decades. He would be proud of you, Dad, Emma said, slipping her hand into mine. Looking down at my children, the only truly good things to come from years of lies, I realized that sometimes losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. The Reynolds family took my marriage, my job, my reputation, and nearly my children. But in the end, they gave me something unexpected, the truth and the chance to rebuild my life on a foundation of something real. My name is Ethan Parker. 6 months ago, I was sleeping in a cheap motel, separated from my children, betrayed by my wife, destroyed by my boss. Today, I'm a business owner, a full-time father, and a man who knows exactly who he is and what he's fighting for. The lies nearly buried me. The truth set me free. If you like this story, please click the hype button. This video deserves to be popular. Have a nice rest.